how good this C63 Coupe is. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Remove Before Race. And yes, Mr. AMG is smiling, standing next to an M car. No, it's not blasphemy, and it certainly isn't when it's the brilliant M2 competition. Many of you know that the M2 is my absolute favorite M car. And it was a concept that was pined after by M fans and petrol heads in general for many years because, of course, the M3 had grew in stature and wasn't quite what it used to be. So when it came out, it dominated and we all loved the car to pieces. And it absolutely dominated its rivals, the A45 and the RS3, in my opinion as well. Certainly the pick of the bunch for me at the moment. So when BMW announced that they were going to improve upon what I felt was already a near perfect car, I was a little bit afraid of this because it's the old adage of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But before we delve into this competition M2, it's important that we understand why us petrol heads were pining after the original M2 in the first place. What was the reason for that? And the reason lies within the history of the M cars, some of the ones in the past that we just cannot get out of our heads. And to appreciate that properly, we need to go back to the car that inspired it all. And that car was the 3-litre CSL. Just look how gorgeous it is. So aggressive, and it was known for a time as the Batmobile due to its extremely aggressive aerodynamic kit. But this car really set the precedent, and you can see it already with the livery and the colors used that BMW now use in M Town, as they like to call it. But it was more than that. It was about making a lighter car, a more track-focused car, one that takes a normal BMW shell and makes it aggressive and sporty. And now that is what translates into all M cars till this day. But as I said, this wasn't the first M car. It was just the first motorsport derived car, and it paved the way for M Division to be created. The first actual M car was this. It's the BMW M1, and what a gorgeous car it is. It's a car that BMW really haven't done again since, at least not in the same way. It was the fastest sports car of its time. In fact, it was a racing supercar, to be honest. And it was stunning. It had this Italian design with the engine out of the 3-litre CSL, and it just speaks for itself. Again, this car was intrinsically linked to motorsport, as there was a racing series of this car, again, which was successful. But the biggest and most significant of all the history was the first M3, and that was the E30 M3. And you'll immediately notice the resemblance, at least in passing, to the M2. This was a serious car. Now tell me if this sounds familiar. It had a completely unique body. It was stripped out. It had a very high revving and exciting engine, and it was driver focused like nothing else in its time. Sure, it wasn't super quick, but immediately the way that it handled resonated with customers, and it was an absolute hit. Now this car, again, it was created because there was a touring version that BMW wanted to race and win races with. So they had to make a road-going version of it in order to satiate the rules for the touring championships at the time. But it sold so well that they had to just continue making more. And then the one that came after that, it was a tough act for the poor E36 to follow, because the E30 was such a legendary car. Of course, the E36, a bit more comfortable, a bit larger, as you would expect a new car to be, but perhaps lost a bit of the magic that made the E30 what it was. But the next one, the E46, I really think this set the precedent for the M cars going forward. You look at the way this car was designed, with its meaty arches, its power dome bonnet, the wheels. You had quad pipes on the back for the first time. You even had a little grille on top of the wheel arch that was a bit like the racing CSL. It was a seriously impressive car. Again, it had a straight six, a lovely interior with Alcantara, and then there was even a CSL version for the first time using that CSL name again. And this was, although very expensive at the time, now it's one seriously pined after car, because it took that E46 formula and made it even more driver focused, even more exciting. Not unlike having a competition or a CS in today's market. But then after that, the M3 and what was later the M4 grew and grew and grew. And while the cars were great, the character of those cars changed just because of the size of them. Of course, you have new technology, you have more safety standards, and just the need for more luxury inside the car, which forces BMW to increase the size, because of course competitors are doing it as well. But then it lost that sweet spot of size and power that the original E30 M3 had. So while they're great cars in their own right, they're a bit boaty, and you do feel it when you drive it. It's not quite the same. And this wasn't really rectified until BMW realized that this was bothering their purists and created the 1M. Now look at that car. Is it not just one of the most gorgeous things we've ever seen created? It had that lovely, lovely wide body kit, a great straight six engine that just screamed, manual gearbox stripped out in this lovely orange color. The only problem with it was, though, it was limited edition. And it's a shame because it was such a brilliant car. And it sold fantastically well. Even today, it holds its value well. And BMW saw that there is appetite for a car that was linked to the E30 in that same sort of size. So then the original M2 was created. And to me, this is the best looking M car that they've ever had. It just has such a wonderful design to it. You took the normal M235i and almost every body panel is changed. The car is so wide, it almost looks square, but it maintains very similar dimensions in terms of where the wheels sit and how the length of the body is to that original E30. But instead of having a down-powered engine, we've got 380 odd brake horsepower in this. So this was the sweet spot. It handled fantastically. It sounded amazing. And even for an AMG nut like me, this was just the sweet spot of small coupes, because AMG don't make anything like this. Audi don't really. I wouldn't compare the TT to it either. This is a very special car in a niche that has not really been exploited. And I wouldn't even put the Cayman up against it because this is more practical. It's got 4 seats. BMW have got this just right. It's something that petrol heads really want. And it was a car, again, that did so well and we all love it. So did we really need to update it? Well, once I thought about it, there was things about the original M2 that could be improved. For example, the engine itself was never actually an M engine. It was shared with the M135i, just uprated. While it was very punchy in the lower speeds, as you got higher and higher and faster, it began to fizz out a little bit. So that's a lot of what this new competition actually addresses. You see, the competition now, it brings in even more from the M3 and M4 than the M2 had. The original M2 had the axles off the M4 only, and a few other bits and pieces, piston rings and whatnot. But this car takes that exact engine, the S55, out of the M3 and the M4 and chucks it into what is, I think, their best chassis and their best body. This S55 engine produces 410 brake horsepower, which is a hefty 40 HP over the standard M2. And it's got even more in it. It's got the carbon strut brace, which you can see clearly here, which is definitely going to improve the rigidity on the front, and we will see that later when we go on the drive. But it wasn't just that. The axles also get ball joints, and then everything was digitally enhanced in terms of the stability program to help aid the new agility of the car. And while I didn't think the design could be improved, I thought it was absolutely awesome. They've gone and done it, haven't they? This is now the best looking M car in my opinion. It channels so much of that lovely M8 concept and just the best bits of the previous M2 and makes it even better. What with the joined kidney grille, the more stylistic and aggressive front lights, and the mouth at the bottom is absolutely glorious. I love the angles and the little details, the way it just looks so aerodynamic, but it looks even wider than before. It's almost an illusion of the way that the new grills and the new shapes have been created on the front. And then you'll notice that the car actually has the M-style mirrors as well, like the M3 and the M4. The rear gets a new light cluster, but the rest is pretty much unchanged, and to be honest, didn't really need changing. There is one odd bit on the rear where the exhaust box looks very large. I was talking to Joe Achilles, Mr. BMW, and I can't get this vision out of my head. He said it kind of looks like a cow's udder underneath, and now I can't unsee that, so thanks for that, Joe. But you can get M Performance parts, which I think in this generation are really cool. They were okay in the last one. So you get a carbon splitter on the front, you get the wing. What I absolutely love, and it's my favorite part, is the new wheel arch on the front here, which just looks absolutely incredible. I love that design. It's a shame that it wasn't just standard in this. The new multi-spokes are interesting looking, but for me, they're not deep dish enough. It'd be nice if there was a different option instead of these ones. And then you notice that this car has silver brakes. So these are the uprated brakes, which are 6-pot brakes on this one, or you get the standard BMW M2 ones, which are the blue caliper version as well. I'd probably stick with those. I don't think the braking was bad in the M2 at all. But again, to me, without having spoilers or livery or anything to denote that this is a sports car, it already does it. It looks so aggressive. It doesn't need any of the badges on it to say, I am from M Town. And that's what I absolutely love about the M2. And this competition has only built upon that and made it even more exciting. But for the longest time now, there's been rumors of an even more hardcore version of this. So apparently there is an M2 CSL due, or will it be a GTS? I'm not sure, but there have been spy shots of it running around. And you see now it has the carbon ceramic brakes highlighted in gold, and it's probably going to have a different design, more carbon. It's going to drop the weight. I think that they haven't dropped the weight of this. In fact, it's increased because of the engine by about 40 to 50 kg. They haven't dropped this car's weight to make that one seem all the more impressive, which I'm sure it will be. Although it will likely be two-seater. And I hope they take some kind of inspiration from that homage CSL concept that they did. I mean, how awesome did that car look? And it looks so much like the Batmobile. Now, before I head inside and show you some of the small updates on the interior, I just want to say a big thank you to Mr. BMW himself, who spent a lot of time just to talk to me about the cars that surround the M2. So thank you for that, Joe.
That's all right, mate. No worries.
Shit, you're actually there.
I am.
Hey.
No worries.
Cheers, buddy.
Absolute pleasure.
Great.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Well, we'll see whether I enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
The jury's out. So guys, yeah, do that. And check out his videos, in fact, because he spent a lot of time in the M2 comp, and you'll get, rather than an AMG view on it, you'll get Mr. BMW's view. But now let's jump inside. I want to show you some of the little things and the big things that they've changed inside, and stuff that's endeared me a little bit more to an interior that I didn't really like before. So inside the M2 competition, there's a couple of things that make me very, very happy indeed. And they're bugbears that I had with the original car. So the first bit that you'll notice immediately as you come in are the excellent seats out of the M3 and the M4. These seats are so, so comfortable to sit in. They're great for people of a smaller frame and a larger frame. And they just look the absolute business. Previously, when the M2 had just the normal M Light seats, it just didn't look right because this was a proper M car. It really needed that identity, and now it has it. It's got the full M seats, M Performance seats, with the illuminated logo as well. They're comfortable, they look great, and now this car feels, just because of that, 50% more of an M car. But there's a few other little changes in here as well, and they too are also significant. So we've now got a slightly updated driver zone here. So if I fire the car up, you see the nice M2 competition logo come up. The competition has its own unique graphics, and although it's not digital per se, it's only part digital with the bottom area, it's LED backlit, so it kind of gives you that vibe. But it's still very analog, and I like this in the M2 because the M2 generally is a very analog feeling car, which is a great thing about it. It's something that we love. So it's nice that the Speedo kind of reflects that. It would have been nice if something more special was done with the steering wheel, but there are M Performance parts that you can get to make this a little bit more special. The other good thing is the iDrive system is the updated one like I had in the M4 CS. So it's all touchscreen, it's very easy to use, and it's a welcome addition in the competition because it brings it up to scratch with its elder siblings. But the most significant thing in here are the addition of the M controls here, because before we didn't have that in the M2, if you remember. It was just rocking from comfort to sport, and you had the traction control button which made the car louder, which it doesn't do here. But you've actually got these now. You can select how energetic the gearbox is, you can go in between Comfort, Sport and Sport Plus on the engine response. You can do the same on the steering as well. And then you've even got the M1 and the M2 buttons on the steering wheel, which we just didn't have before. So this is great. This is making this car even more M. And it's like I said earlier, it's taking the best bits from the M3 and the M4 and putting it into their small car and really making it, I guess, what it should have been in the first place. Apart from that, there's not much to sing and dance about in the interior. You have now got the choice of either blue stitching or orange inside, but it is a real shame that you can't get real leather. This is the Dakota leather. And just to have had a few more options like you get in the M4 would have been amazing, because structurally speaking, this is a really ergonomic interior. And if you could have had leather here and different color leathers here, it could look like a really special and luxury car. It doesn't at the moment, and it's not because the structure of it isn't right, it's because the options aren't offered. And it's a shame because, in my opinion, the M2 is the best M car. So you should be able to configure it as high as you want to. Again, you get the chopped carbon option. Unfortunately, still you can't get gloss carbon fiber. I don't like this because it's basket weave. Again, if you'd just given the option to spec the M2 how you wanted it, it would have looked awesome with some nice gloss carbon here. The rear is pretty much the same, although I have been advised that you should get the 40-20-40 rear seat split, because then you also get cup holders in the back as well, which is quite useful. It's also worth noting, with its connection to the E30 in Spirit, how much the interior still mimics the old E30's one. And this is a nice link for M car fans. But now, as we do with every performance car, we need to see what the car sounds like in startup. This has got a new engine. It's the one out of the M3 and the M4, but it has also got the fuel particulate addition as part of new EU law, which is making all cars quieter. So I'm interested to see what this sounds like. So let's give it a fire up in Sport Plus and see what it sounds like. So that was a pretty half-decent startup, perhaps not as bad as I'd heard. I think a lot of people just start it up without putting it into the Sport Plus mode, and in Comfort you don't get any sound at all on the startup. So let's chuck it now back into Efficient, as it's called, and see what that sounds like on start. You can see on Comfort it doesn't really give anything, and then when you rev it, again, it's rather uneventful. And now if we shove the car into Sport Plus and see what that sounds like on revs. Oh. That is impressive. So the M3, M4 engine seems to suit the M2, which is great. But now to really test it and see what this sounds like on the go, we need to go and do the drive. So let's get on the road and see how the changes to the new M2 comp have improved the car, if at all. When I think back, there was many reasons that I loved my M2, even being a complete AMG nut. And I think, to summarize it, it was that not only did it handle well, like you would expect of all M cars apart from the tail-happy M3, M4 family, but it did it with a certain style and bounds of passion, if that makes sense. It made you kind of emotional about the car, just how well it went about everything. It had brilliant steering and handling that would make even the most amateur driver feel like a hero, but by no means easy. You needed to have some level of skill, which is why you respected the M2 a little bit more, because it wasn't as easy to drive as the A45 or the RS3. The sound of the car was sedate, but still satisfying. There was just a lovely little rumble to that N55 engine. So as I said before, there's not really much that I felt the M2 needed improving on, to be honest. But now it does have a new engine and different components that we need to discover as we drive. So let's start with that engine first of all. Of course, from the M3 and the M4, slightly down-rated, but rather than being a less powerful engine made as powerful as it can be. This is a more powerful engine, slightly detuned. So what I'm hoping is you still get all that low-end grunt, but where the M2's power started to whittle away before, this one will keep on pushing on. That's what I'm hoping for. So let's see what this is like. I'm going to put the car into Sport Plus now, and let's give this engine a bit of a try, shall we? It's weird, I was never really a fan of this engine, but in this smaller chassis, it just seems to work really well. It's got that low-end grunt that I was hoping it would maintain from the previous car. Nice to see that the gearbox responses are pretty much instant. If anything, I think they're a little bit better than they were in the M4 CS. Oh yeah, I got some butterflies there. So I am getting more power in the higher end than I had in the previous M2. So there is some improvement there, which is all I could hope for in a car that was nigh on perfect in my opinion. Let's see, does it have the revs of the M4 and the M3? Yeah, it kind of does scream, which is one thing I really liked about those cars. But then, you know, you compare kind of the immediate push of power you get in the RS3 and the A45, you don't really get that in the M2. But it still does feel quick nonetheless. Then you have to get onto the sound, because even in manual mode and Sport Plus, you're not really getting much, are you? And I think the reason for that is that new fuel particulate filter that's had to come into the car. It was thrown onto BMW M quite late in the game as far as the development of the M2 comp went. So they've, I think, had to kind of rush it out. It sounds okay. It sounds like a powerful car, don't get me wrong. I think the previous one sounded better, and I think this will sound better when it gets its exhaust upgrade option, which is not available yet. You compare the sound again to RS3 and A45, it's simply not on the level of those cars. It's just a shame, because I think it's the only thing that I prefer about the previous M2, and certainly as an AMG nut who loves its sound. But it's not taking away from the enjoyment of it, because kind of then you get onto the handling, and that makes up for so much. So let me show you what this car handles like now. Now, the thing I loved most about the previous M2, as I said, was the handling. So I want to talk about that first. And the first thing that hits you immediately is how bloody good the turn-in is on this car. Now, the previous M2 was good anyway, but on the comp, because of that carbon strut brace in the front, it's that much stiffer, and you could literally run circles around anything. That's how good and precise it is. It tells you exactly where the car is. And the amount of grip then you get, oh, look at the grip on this. But when you want to push out of a corner, it's got lots of power in it. Oh, it's just addictive, and you don't need anything else. This is how good this car is. This is what you would look forward to every time you pick up the key, just to feel how nimble the car is. And that reminds me of a lot of the reviews that I read about the E30, how people sometimes got disappointed thinking, well, this isn't fast, it's only 0 to 60 in 7 seconds and it doesn't sound all that. Where's the charm? And this is where the charm is. It's with this nimble steering that would literally, as I said, run circles around anything. But if you pop it back into comfort and you use it as a daily, suddenly it's a little bit more usable than the previous M2, I think. I don't think it's as skippy on the road as that car was. This seems to deal with little bumps in the road a lot better, where the previous M2 just seemed to get jarred by these small bumps in country roads. So in UK roads, it wasn't really ideal on your A and B roads. Whereas this feels like a more grown-up car. It's only got 50 kg more, but it just feels more planted. And I think we can thank the tweaks to the suspension for that. I personally feel it's a lot more on the daily side, yet they've managed to improve the handling. The M2 comp sits just £3,000 above the previous M2, which is no longer available. Now, you would just pay that just to get the seats, or just to get the carbon strut, or just to get the upgraded engine, or just to get the upgraded looks, or even just the full M controls like its big brothers. you're starting to get the point now. This car, for the extra money, is serious value for money. When you compare it then to something like the M4 CS, which was asking for 30 grand on top for less benefit than this is giving you, in my opinion, this is a seriously good value car. Now, if you want a more sensible daily, you could of course consider the M2 40i, which has very similar kind of straight line performance in daily use, almost identical interior as far as looking at the driver zone and this entire area. Obviously you'll get better economy, etc. But I think his advantage compared to the previous M2 is gone, because the price of that car has gone up a little bit and the price of this hasn't gone up commensurately, whereas its performance and just the ownership factor of this has gone up immensely, in my opinion. And plus, being sensible is boring. Other than having luxury elements like a better interior, slightly more tech, etc., I can't think of another reason why anyone would go for an M4 now. This M2 comp, it just ticks all of the boxes apart from the luxury inside and the tech and the sound. Everything else, in terms of a driving M car, you're not going to get better than this car. And that's not just for M fans, it's for anyone who enjoys a good drive. It just wants to work with you, it just wants to reward the driver. And that's what the best M cars have always done. And that's what this M2 comp does. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that review of the new M2 comp. It certainly made me a very happy driver indeed. So as you always do, please do like and subscribe, and I'm going to go have some more fun.